In the last video, I talked about how I'm getting back to paper decluttering and faced some old unopened mail. I found a 2.5-year-old check for over $1,300. Initially, I berated myself for the oversight, but then I paused and exercised self-compassion. That check had to do with my dad's passing. It arrived 6 months after he died, while I was still grieving and having to deal with paperwork related to his death. The day after I found that check, I put on my big girl pants and called the company to remedy the situation. After being transferred several times and being put on hold, I found out that in 2017, I had requested a stop payment on that check because I thought it was lost in the mail when it was actually lost in my house. And they reissued a new one, which we deposited. So I already attended to this payment issue over 2 years ago, but I had forgotten. There's definitely something to be learned from this incident. Putting off dealing with that one piece of mail back in 2017 created extra work and unnecessary stress for me in 2019. Tim Pitchell, who researches procrastination, talks about how we have two selves. There's our short-term self and there's our long-term self. If we cater to our short-term self, our longer-term self slowly decays. He uses Homer Simpson as an example. In one episode, Homer's wife Marge admonishes him that someday their kids will be grown up and Homer would regret not spending more time with them. To which Homer says, "That's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't envy that guy." Research at UCLA determined that we actually process information about present and future selves with different parts of our brains. And our thinking about future self resembles our thoughts about strangers more than it does our thinking about our present self. Another study told participants they had $1,000 to allocate among different options, including things like planning a fun event, buying something nice for someone else, investing in retirement savings, etc. The participants either saw a picture of themselves as they are now, their present self, or they saw a digitally aged avatar of their image where jowls, bags under the eyes, and other facial changes indicated an aged future self. The participants who saw their older self invested more in retirement savings. That little bit of time travel into the future resulted in present self making a different choice. Remember, we think about our future self more like we think about a stranger. So it's important that we push ourselves into the future to imagine future self. Otherwise, we don't think about future self at all, and we certainly don't have any empathy for future self. When we think about and have empathy for future self, it helps present self make choices that aren't simply based on short-term gain. Now, when a piece of mail comes in marked important account information enclosed, I'll think about future self. I don't want future self to think a check was lost in the mail when it was lost in her own home, request the check to be reissued, then over 2 years later, find the original check and request it to be reissued because she forgot she already had it reissued. Imagining your future self can decrease procrastination over time because when you imagine your future self, you show more empathy to your future self. So ask your future self, how do you feel about the choices I'm making right now? This change in perspective might help you find the motivation to act on your intentions today. It's the start of a new year. Let's all think more about what our choices today are doing to future self.